My ex used me to raise her kids while she lived comfortably, then she left me for another man. Now she's begging for help. I'm a 28-year-old guy who thought I could handle anything for love. When I first met her, she had this effortless charm, warm smile, confident laugh, and this spark that made you believe she could take on the world. She was a single mom, juggling 2 kids and a part-time job, and honestly, I admired her for it. I thought, this is someone worth falling for, someone worth fighting for. Her kids were quiet, polite, and honestly, they won me over before she even knew my name. There was something in their small gestures, helping set the table, calling me mister, that made me feel like I already belonged in their world. I remember the first dinner at her apartment, the faint scent of pancakes lingering from breakfast, the kids' laughter bouncing off the walls, and her eyes catching mine with that tired but happy glow. I couldn't help but imagine what our future could look like, Sunday mornings making pancakes together, weekend trips to the park, her kids calling me dad without hesitation. I told myself stepping in as a partner and father figure wasn't just a choice, it was love. I can do this. I can handle this. Friends tried to warn me. Bro, this is a lot for someone new. Don't lose yourself, one of them said. But I brushed it off, laughing it away, telling myself they didn't understand how I felt. Every time she smiled at me, or leaned on my shoulder during a stressful day, I felt like I had found my place. I even started rearranging my life, fewer nights out, longer hours at work to save more, all to make space for them. I justified it as being responsible, being supportive, being the man she needed. I didn't see it yet, but I was already giving more than I should, losing pieces of myself with every selfless decision. That first week ended with me carrying her groceries up 3 flights of stairs, her kids trailing behind, giggling and asking questions about my life, and her saying softly, "Thanks, I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled, heart full, completely blind. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself, I'd do everything for them. Whatever it took. Whatever they needed. But I had no idea how deep that promise would pull me in, or how it would all unravel. Once I moved in deeper, I realized just how much of a role I'd stepped into. I wasn't just dating her anymore, I was helping raise her kids, managing a household I hadn't fully signed up for, and somehow, I convinced myself it was exactly where I wanted to be. I covered groceries, utility bills, and the occasional school trip, and I started stretching my paycheck to make sure everything ran smoothly. Her kids were learning to ride bikes, struggling with homework, and I was there for every scraped knee and forgotten assignment. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, math book open, kids arguing over fractions, and her softly whispering, "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." My chest swelled, and I smiled, though I was exhausted. Work hours piled up, late nights turned into early mornings, and yet I felt proud. This is love. This is commitment. This is family, I told myself repeatedly. I helped with homework, got them ready for school, and sometimes even drove them to soccer practice before my own day had started. She would linger at the doorway, coffee in hand, watching me, sometimes offering a smile, sometimes just a tired nod. Her approval became my fuel. The apartment smelled faintly of pancakes and laundry detergent, a scent that became oddly comforting, even as I felt the weight of responsibility pressing against my chest. Friends began noticing. "You're disappearing into their life, man," one said over beers. "Don't lose yourself trying to fix everything for them." I laughed it off, deflecting their concerns. "It's fine, I love it. I love them," I told them, but inside, there was a small voice I chose to ignore. That voice whispered, "Is this too much?" She rarely contributed beyond paying for her own bills, claiming her income barely covered essentials. I kept justifying it, she had struggles, the kids came first, I'm lucky to have this family to love. And so I poured myself further into their lives, unknowingly handing over pieces of myself with every act of sacrifice. I felt needed, valued, and yet, a tiny unease lingered in the corners of my mind, but I brushed it aside, focusing on the laughter of the kids echoing in the living room. Little did I know, my devotion was already being taken for granted. It started small, almost imperceptibly. I began noticing little things. She would dodge helping with chores, leave the kids' laundry half-folded, or make excuses about why she couldn't contribute to bills. I remember one night, I was folding socks while she scrolled through her phone, and I asked, "Can you take the kids to bed tonight? I've had a long day." She sighed, rolled her eyes, and muttered, "Ugh, I'm tired too, can't you do it?" My chest tightened, a pang of frustration mixed with guilt. I swallowed it and said, "Fine, I'll do it," telling myself it didn't matter. I wanted peace, I wanted harmony, I wanted them to be happy, and somehow, that justified my exhaustion. Conversations that used to feel warm now carried subtle jabs disguised as jokes. "You're so soft for them," she'd say, laughing, but the tone hit different. The kids, oblivious, clung to me, asking questions and giggling, unaware of the tension threading the air. I remember the smell of dinner burning in the kitchen one night, the kids crying because the spaghetti sauce spilled, and her barely lifting a finger, letting me scramble to fix everything while muttering under her breath. I wanted to confront her, to say something, but I feared rocking the fragile stability we had built. I started feeling like I was invisible in my own sacrifice. Nights I spent cleaning, cooking, and handling homework became the norm, and any suggestion that she help was met with irritation or defensiveness. Friends noticed my fatigue. "Dude, you're being used," one of them said. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "It's fine. I'm fine. I love them. That's what matters." And yet, the nagging feeling kept growing, a whisper in the back of my mind that said, "This isn't balanced. Something's off." I brushed it away, telling myself it was stress, it was life, it was love. But deep down, I knew I was pouring more into their lives than I was receiving in return. I didn't realize then how far this imbalance would stretch me, how much it would cost me, not just my money or time, but my sense of self. By this point, I was barely recognizing my own life. I turned down invitations from friends, skipped family gatherings, and postponed personal goals, all to make sure her household ran smoothly. My savings dwindled from covering unexpected school fees, last-minute bills, and little luxuries she insisted the kids deserved. I remember sitting on my couch one Friday night, my back aching, watching her kids play a video game while she lounged on the armchair scrolling through her phone. The smell of popcorn lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of her perfume, and I realized I couldn't even remember the last time I'd eaten something I truly wanted. I convinced myself it was worth it. I'm building a family. I'm doing the right thing. But inside, exhaustion had started gnawing at me. My own needs were sidelined, my hobbies forgotten, my social life non-existent. She rarely acknowledged the effort I put in, it was expected, normalized. I remember saying one night, "I'm tired, can we at least split some of the chores?" She looked at me like I'd asked for something outrageous. "What? I do enough, don't I?" she snapped, before heading to bed, leaving me holding dirty dishes and a pit of frustration in my stomach. I started noticing subtle resentment bubbling inside me, but guilt always tempered it. How could I be angry when I had chosen this? I told myself love required sacrifice, that being selfless was noble, that doing everything for them made me a good man. But the constant imbalance weighed on me, like invisible chains tightening around my chest. Even the kids' laughter, once comforting, now carried an undercurrent of melancholy. They sensed my fatigue, even if they didn't understand it. And yet, I couldn't stop. I kept giving, kept sacrificing, kept believing that my devotion would be enough. I just didn't know it would never be enough for her. Because what I thought was love, was slowly turning into my trap. It all came crashing down one evening I'll never forget. I'd noticed little inconsistencies before, her phone buzzing late at night, hushed conversations, and sudden excuses, but I brushed them aside, telling myself I was overthinking. That night, though, I stumbled across messages that made my stomach drop. Flirty texts, dinner plans I wasn't invited to, laughter I knew wasn't meant for me. My hands shook as I read, every word twisting the knife deeper. She wasn't just distracted, she was seeing someone else, someone outside of the life I'd been building with her and her kids. I confronted her quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you seeing someone?" I asked, my heart hammering. She froze, then quickly smiled, brushing it off. It's complicated. It's not serious. You know I love you. But the guilt in her eyes betrayed her words. My chest tightened, my throat raw with anger and hurt. I had spent months giving everything, my time, my money, my heart, and it was being exploited right in front of me. I remember pacing the living room, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, the kids' laughter from the next room stabbing at me like a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the kitchen from breakfast I'd made hours earlier, and I realized I'd been so blinded by devotion that I hadn't seen the cracks forming right before me. I wanted to scream, cry, throw something, but I just sat down, feeling hollow. I thought we were a family, I whispered, more to myself than to her. She looked away, fidgeting, unable to meet my gaze. In that moment, I understood something terrifying. My love, my sacrifices, my effort, they hadn't mattered. She had been living comfortably off my devotion while plotting a life that didn't include me. And just like that, everything I thought was secure shattered. I didn't know how I'd move forward, but I knew one thing. My life was about to get a lot worse before it got better. She left me. Just like that. One morning, she packed a few bags, loaded the kids into the car, and drove away, leaving behind the apartment, the bills, and the quiet echoes of everything I'd built for them. I stood in the doorway, numb, staring at the empty room that had once felt like home. The smell of her perfume lingered faintly in the air, a cruel reminder of her absence. I sank onto the couch, head in my hands, realizing that the life I had poured everything into, the dinners, the homework, the rides, the sacrifices, hadn't mattered to her at all. Friends tried to console me, but their words barely reached through the fog of humiliation and heartbreak. "She'll come around," one said, but I couldn't imagine that being true. Nights became unbearable. I replayed every interaction, every text, every smile that I thought was genuine, now twisted into evidence of manipulation. The kids' laughter, once a comfort, was replaced by an unbearable silence I couldn't escape. I felt invisible, used, and broken, as if my devotion had been a currency spent only to be rejected. I remember staring at my bank account, now drained from months of covering everything, and feeling my stomach twist. The apartment felt cold, smells of laundry detergent and leftover food mocking me with their emptiness. I walked through each room slowly, as if saying goodbye to every little memory I had tried to build. Every photograph of them on the fridge became a knife to my chest. I questioned everything about myself. Was I too trusting? Too naive? Too foolish to see the signs? My heart ached with the knowledge that I had been giving my all to someone who didn't care. I realized, in that moment, that this wasn't just heartbreak, it was betrayal in its rawest, cruelest form. And as I sat there, alone, the silence pressing down on me, I knew something had to change. But I had no idea how I'd find the strength to face her, or myself, again. After the initial shock wore off, I was left with nothing but silence, and my own thoughts. I spent hours replaying everything, dissecting every moment, every choice I had made. I realized I had ignored warning signs for far too long, her evasive texts, her excuses, the way she subtly shifted responsibility onto me. How could I have been so blind? I asked myself, feeling the sting of regret sharpen with every memory. The sacrifices I had made, the overtime, the extra shifts, the endless homework sessions, the bills I covered, they were all now a part of my personal heartbreak ledger. I started writing it all down, almost compulsively. Every moment of selflessness, every time I had gone above and beyond, every slight of hers I had excused, I needed it somewhere tangible, so I could finally see it for what it was. Her betrayal wasn't just a personal wound, it was systemic, a pattern that had been unfolding before my eyes while I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. I felt both foolish and heartbroken, wondering how I could have been manipulated so thoroughly. I also reflected on the good moments, the laughter of her kids, the small smiles she had given me, the fleeting moments of genuine connection. Those memories were bittersweet, because they reminded me of what I had loved and lost. But deep down, I knew that love alone wasn't enough when someone doesn't value it. I had been giving my all to a life that was never mine to have. Anger began to seep in alongside the sadness. I realized that her manipulation had gone beyond just me. She had created a life that depended on my efforts while she remained comfortably detached. And yet, despite everything, a part of me still wished things could have been different. I just didn't know if that part of me could survive another betrayal. Then came the call I wasn't expecting, a message that would turn everything upside down and force me to reconsider everything I thought I knew. Months had passed, and I was slowly picking up the pieces of my life when her message appeared on my phone. My chest tightened as I read it. She needed help. At first, I thought it was a joke, some ploy for attention, but the tone was desperate, almost frantic. Apparently, her new life had fallen apart, the man she had left me for had abandoned her, and now she was struggling financially and emotionally. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, disbelief, and an almost irrational urge to make sure she didn't get away with everything unchallenged. Her kids were part of it too, caught in the middle of her chaos. She wrote about their struggles, her guilt, and how they were suffering without my support. Every word felt like a hand reaching into my chest, twisting a wound that had only just started to heal. I remembered the nights I had stayed up, helping them with homework, the mornings I'd dragged myself out of bed for soccer practices, the countless sacrifices I'd made, and now she was turning to me after abandoning me. I sat in my empty apartment, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the mug I had left on the counter, staring at the screen. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the anticipation of the power shift I suddenly realized I held. For the first time, I had leverage, and the idea both scared and thrilled me. Friends had told me before to take my time, to think carefully about how to respond. I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be an unpaid servant to her mistakes again. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the kids' needs entirely. They were innocent in all this. I typed a reply, paused, deleted it, then stared at the phone again. Do I help her, or do I let her face the consequences of everything she's done? And just like that, the balance of power had shifted, but the hardest choice was still ahead. I spent the next few days thinking, analyzing, planning. Every message she sent, every desperate plea, only made me more aware of how much control I now held. I began listing everything: bills I had paid, sacrifices I had made, the time I had given her and her kids. Writing it down felt almost cathartic, like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been lost in the chaos of her life. I knew I had a choice: I could ignore her, help her, or use this as a way to finally take back my dignity. Friends offered advice. Don't give her the satisfaction, one said. Make sure you protect yourself first. I nodded, knowing they were right, but part of me wrestled with the thought of the kids, innocent, unaware, caught in her whirlwind. I had to find a way to respond that preserved my self-respect while still being fair to them. I could almost feel the shift happening. She had assumed I would be at her beck and call, but that assumption was about to be challenged. I walked through the apartment, the faint smell of old laundry and coffee lingering in the air, thinking about how many nights I had spent exhausted, trying to make everything perfect for her. I had given so much, and yet I had been taken for granted. The anger simmered beneath the surface, coiling tighter with every breath. I realized that whatever choice I made next would define how this story ended, and it would be my terms, not hers. Her messages kept coming, each one more desperate than the last, each one unknowingly fueling my plan. I smiled quietly to myself, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: power. For the first time, I wasn't at her mercy. But I knew one wrong move, one impulsive reply, and everything could spiral out of control. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The time to act was coming, and I had to be ready. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, I discovered something I didn't expect. Her desperation wasn't entirely genuine. I found out through a mutual friend that she had been exaggerating her struggles, inflating the story of her financial and emotional collapse to gain sympathy from people around her. My stomach sank. She wasn't just relying on me, she had been performing this act for months, maybe even years, to manipulate everyone in her orbit. The betrayal wasn't limited to me, it was bigger, more deliberate, and it cut deeper than I could have imagined. I remembered every pleading text, every tearful voice note, every "I don't know what I'd do without you" she had sent. I had believed it all. My devotion had been a stage for her theatrics, and the reality hit me like a cold splash of water. The kids were still innocent, yes, but I realized how completely I had been fooled by her calculated charm. Anger flared, raw and consuming. I felt foolish, yes, but mostly furious that I had been reduced to a pawn in her games. I paced the apartment, the faint hum of the fridge loud in the otherwise silent room. I could almost smell the old coffee, hear the echo of the laughter that had once made me feel needed. It all felt like a cruel joke now. I clenched my fists, feeling a rush of adrenaline and clarity at the same time. I wasn't going to be played again. Not by her, not by anyone. This revelation changed everything. My plan, my sense of justice, the way I would handle her next request, it all shifted in that instant. I realized I wasn't just deciding how to respond anymore, I was deciding how to reclaim every ounce of respect she had taken from me. And as I stared at her messages, still begging, still desperate, I knew one thing for certain: this was no longer about helping, this was about making her see the cost of her betrayal. I finally agreed to meet her, but this time, it was on my terms. I chose a neutral cafe, crowded enough that she couldn't manipulate the setting or command attention. When she arrived, her eyes widened as she realized I wasn't the desperate, pliable man she had been used to. I sat across from her, calm, collected, the faint smell of coffee and pastries around us contrasting sharply with the tension in the air. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid a chair closer to me, probably expecting pity. "I got your messages," I said quietly, letting each word land slowly. She blinked, almost as if my calm tone shocked her. I know I messed up, and she stammered, but I held up a hand. "Save it. I know exactly what you did. Every text, every excuse, every lie. I know about him, about your exaggerations, and about the games you played with everyone around you." Her face paled, and for the first time, I saw fear, or maybe regret. She tried to interrupt, pleading, "Please, I need help," but I shook my head. "No. You've had months to figure your life out. I won't be your crutch anymore. I'm done being your safety net. You'll see now what it feels like to be accountable for your choices." The words hit her harder than any shouting match could have. The kids' well-being was still on my mind, so I made it clear they were my priority, but her comfort, her convenience, that was over. As I stood to leave, she reached out, desperation written across her face. I paused, gave her one last look, calm, firm, unyielding, and walked away. She had begged, pleaded, and manipulated, but none of it worked this time. I felt a surge of relief, pride, and a strange sense of closure. For the first time since it all began, I was in control of my life again. And as I stepped into the sunlight outside, I knew that she would never underestimate me, or anyone else, again. After that day, my life began to feel like my own again. I focused on rebuilding, on my career, my friends, and my own sense of self-worth that had been buried under months of sacrifice. I stayed involved in the kids' lives, but this time on my terms. No more overextending, no more being taken for granted. I set clear boundaries, and for the first time, I felt respected, valued, and seen. The apartment that once smelled of burnt toast and faint coffee now smelled of fresh possibility, quiet but alive with potential. I started cooking for myself again, laughing at my own jokes, taking walks without worrying about anyone else's demands, little things that reminded me who I was. I reflected on what I had learned. Love shouldn't mean losing yourself, devotion shouldn't be exploited, and boundaries aren't cruelty, they're self-preservation. The anger I had felt was now tempered with clarity. I realized that her betrayal, as painful as it was, had taught me the most important lesson of all: my worth isn't defined by anyone else's choices. I was free to rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. Friends noticed the change immediately. "You seem lighter," one said. I smiled, finally able to believe it myself. There was a sense of empowerment in knowing that I had faced the hurt, recognized the manipulation, and refused to let it dictate my life any longer. Even the memory of her messages, begging and pleading, no longer held power over me. I had taken back my agency, and that felt like victory. Sometimes I think about her life likely still chaotic, relying on the same tricks she used before, but it doesn't matter. I have my peace, my boundaries, and my dignity intact. And most importantly, I've learned to value myself above anyone else's convenience or charm. I'm finally living for me, and for the first time in years, that feels incredible.